Well, hello everyone. Here we are with another interview to go along with our look back at the Jesus movement and a look forward into what could this possibly mean for us going forward, us and especially for some of the younger folks who are a part of our community here, because we really get excited about looking at the future and what that might hold. And it's a pretty scary picture right now. And so we want to come alongside millennials and Gen Z folks and help them sort out, maybe just walk along with them. They know a lot more than we do about this world. I can tell you that. But we have some things that we've learned, from our years, and especially looking back at the Jesus movement. And so I'm very excited to be able to have with us today my very good friend, my former pastor, and Chuck Smith Jr., who is very much, you can imagine, connected to the Jesus movement, although kind of in a transitional way, as the son of Chuck Smith Sr. So Chuck has agreed to come on and talk with me a little bit about what he knows of the Jesus movement. I know, Chuck. Maybe we should start out with I know you were a little behind it. I think you shared that with me before, and so what? But still, what was your experience in a general terms with the Jesus movement?
Well, John, I was 16 years old when Lonnie Frisbee first showed up at our house. And right away, I was taken aback at his look. I mean, it's difficult for young people today to imagine what long hair and a beard and a Nehru shirt and embroidered Levi's, meant in 1968, 1969. I mean, everything was so IBM, so the skinny neckties, the buzz cut hair, the almost the Second World War, men returning home from military service and still maintaining that military attitude, that military style. And then all of a sudden, this radical counterculture that was making a statement about going natural, a statement about the plastic society, about an unreal world, that they're getting back to being real. So you let your hair grow, you let your beard grow. And so when I first saw him, I was like, hippies are okay, but what's he doing in our house? But as soon as he spoke, it was unlike anyone else. And I didn't know this at the time, but Lonnie was only a couple of years older, maybe 3 or 4 years older than I was, but he had seen so much more life by the time he was 20, than I had seen. So he just seemed much older and much more mature. But he immediately spoke Jesus. He immediately spoke the Holy Spirit, just as naturally as if he began a conversation talking about the weather. And it was apparent that God was really real to him. So my parents embraced Lonnie and his wife Connie immediately. They were thrilled to meet him. They felt like he was, let's say, an informant regarding the hippie culture, that he could help them understand it. But they also saw him as a missionary to the hippie culture. And so they would allow me to drive him and Connie to various Bible studies, but also a lot of times to Laguna Beach, to Main Street, Huntington Beach, where there were, conglomerations of hippies. And I'd take Lonnie and Connie there so that they could share their faith. And sometimes extraordinary things happen and sometimes ordinary things happen. But, so I was right there. As far as Orange County goes, I was right there at the epicenter right from the start. But I wasn't a hippie. So I knew that I was not one of them, but I'd hang out at their Bible studies and the communal houses and stuff and spend time with them. But there was a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. How much were you involved as the Jesus movement continued to develop?
I taught Bible studies. I taught Bible studies in my early 20s and in the various communes. I had a service in my dad's church. And this is something interesting. Chuck Fromm, he was living in Yuba City at the time, and he was very much involved with getting musical groups, the Maranatha music bands, from Orange County up to Yuba City. And he created a musical tour route that would include Napa, Sacramento, Louis Neely's church there, Yuba City, and Modesto. And so on any weekend, these groups would travel up there and there'd be concerts in each of these places. And so it would be a band or two, or it'd be a band and then a single artist and an evangelist. And a lot of times I was the evangelist who traveled with those bands. So I got to spend time with them also. Guys from The Way, Parable, Mustard Seed Faith, Denny Stahl, Debbie Kerner. I mean, so those were ways that I was involved.
So you were the evangelist? I mean, my goodness. Were you aware of that the Holy Spirit was really involved in your life and helping you at that point? I mean, were you aware of what was going on?
Yes, I was fully aware, and I've always been fully aware that I don't have it in me, to do some of the things, I've been put in front of people, and it's not in me. And in fact, thank you for bringing that up, because one of the hallmarks of that period of time is that we believed we were living in the book of Acts. We didn't see it as the book of Acts because we just thought the book of Acts was the standard for the church, how it was supposed to flow. So the Holy Spirit is working through people. He's giving them gifts. He's empowering them. So I was very much aware that I wasn't alone when I spoke.
Wow. I think we all kind of felt like we are sort of riding a wave.
Yes.
Don't you think? Yeah. Well, we all have such fond memories of those years. It seems like, I guess, because we're at the 50-year mark, depending on how you set your calendar. Last June was the 50-year reunion of Explo 72 in Dallas. just for your information, I have a tendency to think of Expo that as the end of the Jesus movement. And the reason I set that as the end is because to me, the true Jesus movement is what we were just talking about. People just simply getting up and being led by the Holy Spirit and hardly having a clue what they were doing. And God obviously moving and doing incredible things. I look at Expo 72 and all of the work and organization that went into getting 100,000 people into a stadium, and go, I don't know. This doesn't feel the same as, baptisms in the ocean.
John, I fully agree with you. What was the hippie movement? Well, there were love-ins. There was Woodstock. These events that, there was some planning, but no one was planning for what actually happened at Woodstock. It was overwhelming, the number of people who showed up. It was, go to San Francisco and it would just be there. Everything was a being, happening. Mm-hmm. And that was a characteristic of the Jesus movement at first. It was on the street. Mm-hmm. Lonnie, wherever he went, it seemed like he drew a crowd. He would just start talking and people would want to hear what he was saying and they'd crowd around. Also, this was at a time, the Jesus movement came towards the end of the hippie movement. That is, things were going bad. People were having bad acid trips, going off and not coming back. There were all these board and care homes where these people who had blown their minds were just housed. No one. I remember going into locked wards of hospitals where, psych wards, where they just had people drugged out. They didn't know what else to do with them. I think Thorazine was a big, drug at the time, or Valium, or what, just like calm them down. But there wasn't any real healing going on. So, there's a scary side. And then organized crime moved into Haight-Ashbury. And it used to be free grass, free acid. And now, not only were you paying for things, people were getting mugged and, and there were dealers on the street. And then there was that concert where the Rolling Stones provided, and after that, I think it was Mother Earth said, their cover article was "Our Innocence is Dead." Mm-hmm. It was that or Rolling Stone, one of those two magazines. Our innocence is dead. And so now you had all these people who had left their homes, lived on the street, lived in communes, left society, and they were just out there. And things were going bad out there. And they needed some point to re-enter society. And when they were out on the street, they heard peace and love, but not connected to drugs, connected to Jesus. Mm-hmm. And it was almost like, I don't know if this is what you experienced, you were more up north, but it was almost like there were children coming to a spiritual Disneyland. And there were, a lot of the songs that we sang initially, they weren't the folk rock songs that became the heartbeat of the Jesus movement. They were like Sunday school songs. They were children's songs, Love Him in the Morning When You See the Sun Rising, Salisbury, and some of those, they were youth group songs. Yeah. And but they worked. Pass It On.
He's Everything to Me.
Exactly. So, after Expo 72, I think that then it became an establishment thing, where churches were, and then you had the birth of a music industry. Right. Praise and worship, first of all, the Christian bands, and then praise and worship music industry, and books started being written, and the rest is history.
Yeah. it was it was a time of I think the Holy Spirit was simply gathering in um, probably the next generation of leaders, people who are going to actually run the church, you know.
Right.
And yeah, I'm looking though at all this. There's a lot of looking back going on right now with that, with there's a Jesus music movie that came out earlier this year. Love Song is working on a documentary. Salt Company has already made one. And then there's the Jesus Revolution film with Kelsey Grammer playing your dad in it. That's going to be out in February. What do you think about all of this looking back? Is that good, or is it bad, or is it a little of both? What do you think?
Well, what I think is that we have enough history now to look back and say, wow, that was unique. I mean, we're talking about one of those, great American revivals. And we're looking back and saying thousands of people's lives were changed. Thousands of people came to faith in droves. And we understand now the rarity of that. I mean, even in the good old-fashioned tent revival days, maybe per capita, there was a percentage that was similar, but we haven't seen since that time anything like this. And we haven't seen anything since. So I think that we're realizing something really significant happened, and we're asking, well, could that happen again? Did that have to be the end of it?
What do you think?
Well, this is God's work. So, no one can predict. Charles Finney might have disagreed with that. He believed you could organize a revival. But so of course it could happen again. It's just, God moving his hand on people's lives. I think, though, there'd have to be the same kind of commitment and dedication. He's like, a lot of young people. I mean, when I was 16 years old, I slept in a lot of different places, and I didn't need much. If you had a car and, some clothes packed in the trunk, you could go anywhere, or you didn't even need a car. I did a lot of hitchhiking too. So there almost has to be that kind of, well, I'm willing to leave all this for that. I'm going to fully sell out to this. So if we can do that, yeah, it can happen again. Not that would make it happen if, we all just went and lived on the streets. But if we were willing, to walk away from, from whatever God said, you have to leave this behind now and come follow me. And in that regard, I think that it is happening. We're not seeing it as much, and it's not as widespread or wide scale, but I believe it is happening. And then a lot of those of us who did, walk away from everything, well, we didn't have anything to begin with. We're living comfortably now, so maybe we're not ready to do that again.
Interesting. Wow. Do you think that let me put it this way. What do you think that we can bring forward from the Jesus movement? Are there any things that we can say, now let's take that and do that again, or encourage this, or what kind? Maybe there's a certain environment that was created that we can create again, that may not make it happen, but might provide, I don't know. talk about that a little bit.
Well, John, my initial response to what you're saying is you're asking the right questions. And that's much better than saying we have answers. I really think we need to, if we ask the right questions, then we'll be going the right direction. So you didn't say, let's teach this generation to use rock and roll to communicate Jesus.
Right.
That was an innovation back then. It's not an innovation today.
Right.
But what did that say back then? It said, if we were to translate it today, use what is uniquely yours, uniquely your generation, and do that. So there are things like that, not the specifics, but some of the underlying dynamics that, will, I think be yourself is really important. Use what is in your hand. For us, everyone had an acoustic guitar. I mean, I say everyone, but you know what I mean. And I don't know, most of my friends and I could play C, G, and F. Not well, but we could manage. So that was like that was like the musical instrument of the time. And out of that came, lots of worship songs, lots of evangelistic songs. I mean, there was rock and roll, but that wasn't necessarily the mainstay of what became the worship. So I think, okay. There's a saying, I think it's Marshall McLuhan saying that technology is not technology if it was there when you were born. So when I was born, shovels were already here. So the shovel was not new technology. But for me, well, okay, I'll put it this way. My 10-year-old grandson, actually, when he was, I think, 8 years old, one day I showed him my smartphone and I said, Caleb, when you did something on my phone the other day to show me how much battery I had left, what was it that you did? And he looked up at me and said, Grandpa, how long have you had that phone? You don't know that. You don't know how to, you got this phone, you don't even know how to work it. And he, at 1.5, 2 years old, he had a phone where he was, swiping and going for the things that he liked on it. And now it's like he can live on an iPad or a cell phone. It's not technology. It's not new technology for him. So what are the ways of communicating that are innate to the younger generations? There's Instagram, there's TikTok, scary as it is to us. There's, of course, YouTube. I don't see how these things cannot play into it. But I wouldn't say you have to use this or this is your tool. Yeah. They know their tools better than I do.
Yeah.
They know what's innate to their time better than I do. So, but that's what I would say is use what belongs to you and what you're good at.
That's really helpful. That's great. I'm thinking, most of the younger generation, however, are not going to church. I think everybody is pretty much aware of that. What do you think that means? Does it necessarily mean they're abandoning the gospel, or it just they don't like this part of it?
And I think there's probably several answers to that. And I want to add something to that, John. And I almost feel like I need to apologize for saying this, but some of the young people who are in church, the kids who aren't in church don't want to be like them. They can't relate to them. I mean, there are some 80-year-old minds trapped in 21-year-old bodies And they've been told this is what a Christian is, and this is how you have to do it. And so they're not going to be the leaders. If there's some big new explosion, they're not going to be the leaders of it. They may be important. They may be important for grounding and biblical teaching and things like that. But the dynamic leaders are going to be more in touch with their generation. I think then the other question is, are they open to God? They're not interested in church, but are they interested in God? Are they interested in having conversations about God? Are they interested in exploring? And the answer is yes, absolutely. There may be some who it's such a blank because they weren't exposed to it that they, what's the point? Who needs that? I mean, that's typically the attitude about church. What can church do for me? But as far as God, if they're exposed to it, there's a lot more interest. And they might know a little bit about Buddhism and a little bit about Christianity and a little bit about Islam, but not a whole lot about anything. But they've formed a lot of their own ideas. And they want, like all of us, they want to believe in heaven. That, especially as the world becomes more desperate and scary, more dangerous.
Wow. Oh gosh, Chuck, I wish we could just kind of keep this rolling and talk forever. We're running out of time. Great ideas. And I think some very important things. I appreciate you sharing mostly about looking forward. I think that's been great. I have one more question, and that is, what about I don't know how you want to translate this. It doesn't matter. What about the Jesus movement do we need the most today? How would you answer that?
That is another good question. Wow, John, I'm just going to come up with an answer. I don't think it's the best, but I think what is needed today is the people who will just do it. They will not care about building a campus. They will not care about creating an organization. They won't. They may be individuals, but if they're individuals with a strong vision and a sense of calling, and who also are filled with the Holy Spirit, they'll move people. I think one of the amazing things about the Jesus movement is that the young people were leading the old. I know that my parents asked the hippies lots of questions, my mom especially, what does turned on mean? What does flipped out mean? Or what does flash? I just flashed on something. What does that mean? And all this terminology, I blew my mind, all this terminology from the drug aspect of the hippie culture. I think the youth can be leaders again. I think it's surprising for older people to hear young people talk about Jesus with intense enthusiasm and devotion. Not scripted. Like Mormon missionaries are trained. It's like, I just don't want to hear that. But dynamic, spontaneous.
Wow. Wonderful. Love it. Chuck, thank you so much. This was very, very stimulating. And we'll have to do it again sometime.
Good. A pleasure as always, John.
Okay. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Bye.